With Super Bowl 58 officially in the books, the Raiders start to turn the page into the offseason and see how they could put everything together to compete with those back-to-back champs. That plus a whole lot more comes up on Tuesday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, February 13th, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available. As always, if you're checking us out on YouTube, thank you. We definitely appreciate that. Show has grown in a major way. That's because of you, Raider Nation. Of course, because of my man Ari, who does a great job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, and we're sounding good. Shout him out at Ari Produces on Twitter. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. We got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. We'll get back to calls and texts coming up in segment number 3. We didn't have any on Monday as we had the CBS tribute to Al Davis that I thought was phenomenal. We had that on Monday's show, so instead of having calls and texts, we did that. If you missed it, definitely go back and check that out. Matter of fact, on my radio show, Unnecessary Roughness, Raider Nation Radio 920, later on this afternoon, one of the producers of that's going to be on the show, so I'm excited about that. Around 3:30 Pacific time, we're going to have that. So I look forward to hearing what went into the making of that CBS tribute that they did to Al Davis right before Super Bowl 58. Thought they did a great, incredible job. So calls and texts coming up in segment number 3. Segment number 2, Captain Kirk, my guy, Kirk Morrison, former Raider linebacker, played with the Buffalo Bills, played with the Jacksonville Jaguars. He joined my radio show on Monday, kind of put a bow on Super Bowl 58. Talked about Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs. Also talked about the Raiders moving forward, Antonio Pierce, what they didn't need to do at the quarterback position, what him and Thomas Howard, the law firm of Morrison and Howard, what they would have done to try to defend a guy like Patrick Mahomes, and a whole lot more. Had a great conversation with Captain Kirk, who's a very sharp football mind. You'll hear that coming up in segment number 2. Here is segment number 1, news and notes of the day, as I always do. We'll go ahead and jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor, which is FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started today. Off top, want to give you some news about assistant coaches when it comes to the silver and black. As you know, the Raiders are trying to put their staff together. We know Luke Getsy is the offensive coordinator, but there's still some positions that need to be filled, including the running back position, the running back coach's position, I should say. Last week or the week before, when we all believed Cliff Kingsbury was going to be the offensive coordinator, the Raiders had gone out and signed Deshaun Foster to be their running back coach. Deshaun Foster goes back to Texas Tech with Cliff Kingsbury back in 2016. They were on the same staff as Kingsbury was the head coach. Deshaun Foster was the running backs coach there. Well, he comes from UCLA, and the Raiders had signed him to be their running backs coach. Well, that lasted 1 week. According to Adam Schefter and Pete Thamel, Raiders running back coach Deshaun Foster has landed the job of a lifetime. He's set to head back to UCLA. UCLA is set to hire Deshaun Foster as the school next head coach. He's in the UCLA Hall of Fame as a player, worked as an assistant coach there since 2017, and played 7 seasons in the NFL. So Chip Kelly hightailed it out of UCLA, went to Ohio State as the offensive coordinator. Tells you all you need to know, right, about the UCLA program. Not that I'm trying to poo-poo on it, but if a guy like Chip Kelly all of a sudden wants to get out of there as a head coach, go to Ohio State and be an offensive coordinator, kind of lets you know that he doesn't want to be a college head coach anymore. Probably wants to find his way back to the NFL. But Deshaun Foster is now all of a sudden the head coach at UCLA. He goes from being the running back coach there to being the running back coach with the Raiders to all of a sudden heading back in a week time and being the head coach now of the UCLA Bruins. So big ups to Deshaun Foster. I'm not mad. Chip Kelly getting out of there was his gain, and I think that's awesome that he gets that opportunity. But, of course, that leaves a big void for the Raiders in their running back coach's position. So they still got to find their next running backs coach. Also, a couple little nuggets here. Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune is reporting that Bears assistant offensive line coach Luke Steckel will be the Raiders' new tight end coach. So obviously he's got familiarity with Luke Getsy, who is the Raiders' offensive coordinator. Now he's going to become the Raiders' new tight end coach. Also, another nugget I want you to pay attention to. March 17th, put that on your calendar. That's the date that the Raiders need to make a decision on Jimmy G by. He is due $11.25 million roster bonus on that day. So they've got to make a decision before or leading right up to, button up against that day, or else he's going to get $11.25 million. Now, I expect that he's going to get cut. I expect that they're going to let him go, but that's just my gut feeling. There is a day and place, and there is a time, and there is a way that they could try to restructure his contract and keep him around on the roster and say, you know what, this is a guy that is a veteran. He can help out the quarterback room. He's a pro's pro. He's helped Aiden O'Connell out quite a bit. So maybe there's room for Jimmy G in the end. I don't see it. I think that he's going to want to get up out of there and try to be a starter somewhere else in the league. I don't see that happening either, but you never know. You saw Mitchell Trubisky of the Steelers on Monday. They agreed to mutually part ways, so he's trying to dip his toes into the quarterback free agent market because there's not a whole lot of free agent quarterbacks going to be out there available during this offseason. So I expect Jimmy G will do the same, but until we find out, until we actually know, we don't know. So pay attention to March 17th. That's the day Jimmy G is due $11.25 million roster bonus on that day. Also, former NFL defensive back Mark McMillan, he played for the Eagles, played for the Chiefs, amongst others, was a teammate of the great Eric Allen, was also on my radio show on Monday, Unnecessary Roughness on Raider Nation Radio 920. Had him talking about a bunch of different subjects from the Chiefs to what the Raiders roster looks like, but I wanted him to talk about Eric Allen. Again, he played with Eric Allen, and it's unfortunate that EA didn't make it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame this time. It was his 18th year of eligibility. He's only got 20 years of eligibility before he has to go into the senior class, so I'm hoping that EA gets in. Thought he was going to make it this time around. It seemed like it was really close, and it wasn't. But I asked Mark McMillan straight up what he thought about EA not making it into the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
Actually, he called me probably like 2 weeks ago, and he told me, it's like, hey, man, I came up a little short, but you can't say anything because, they don't want it to go on social media that I didn't make it, and man, it was paining me not to tweet that out, man, that he didn't make it. And I'm just lost for words, man. You look at his stats, you look at his numbers, you look at the way he carried himself, never been in any trouble. The man has balled out on every uniform, from the Eagles to the Saints to the Raiders. He was in the Super. It's just so many things that warrant him to be in the Hall of Fame. I always talk to Sterling Sharp when he says, like, man, I'm not tripping, because every time I see one of you DBs, you guys know that I earned your respect. And he said, no jacket, no yellow jacket is going to change me any way or fashion. And just for Eric, man, it's just, he didn't come to the specificities. I saw his son. He was pissed off, man, rightfully so, because, he's gotten there so many times, but this time he was like right there on the cusp. And like I said, I don't mean to throw any shade to those other guys, man, but at some point, man, it's like it's a joke. Like I said, I'm lost for words, man. I know there's some kids out there listening to the show probably, but I can't say what I really want to say with some four-letter words. But man, I told Eric, I said, man, you know me, I don't hold my tongue. I'll speak up for you, because Eric's not that kind of guy. But it's pretty crappy, man, that he didn't get his name called. And it's like when he gets his name called, it's going to be exciting. But at the same point, it's like, man, what took y'all so long? Like it's like a slap in the face. And
right.
Devin Hester, hats off to him, because that man is amazing.
Yep.
But some of the DBs that went in before him, I don't want to call their names out, but they know who they are.
Yeah.
Ty Law, come on, man. Barber from Tampa Bay, who played cover 2. Ty Law played cover 2. Eric was a man-to-man shutdown guy. I know it because I got more balls than he did every week.
And the thing that works against Eric is the fact that he wasn't flashy. He wasn't a guy that was boisterous. He wasn't a guy that was dancing all over the field. He wasn't talking trash. He wasn't pulling a Neon Dion or any of that stuff. He just went about his business and handled it the right way, and and put up the numbers. Has great stats that should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame that not a lot of people are really talking about. And what do I mean by that? Well, let me go ahead and tell you. I'm glad you asked. Allen made 5 Pro Bowl teams and 1 first-team All-Pro in his 7 years with the Eagles, made a 6th Pro Bowl with the Saints. Finished his 14-year career with the Eagles, Saints, and Raiders with 54 regular season interceptions, 8 pick sixes, as well as 4 postseason interceptions, and a 9th pick six. Now, here you go. There are 23 cornerbacks and 45 defensive backs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Only 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Uno, dos, tres, cuatro. Whatever language you say. Only 4 of them had 58 career interceptions and 9 interception return for touchdowns in their entire career. Of those 4, only 2 did it as full-time quarterbacks, Aeneas Williams and Deion Sanders. The others, Charles Woodson and Rod Woodson, only reached those marks after converting to safety. So Allen had more interceptions and return touchdowns than 41 of 45 Hall of Fame defensive backs and 21 of 23 Hall of Fame cornerbacks. Think about that right now. as you think about why EA is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Really bummed out for Eric. I consider him a really good friend. I think he should be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and I hate that he isn't. He's got 2 more years of eligibility before he becomes a senior member, and at some point he will get into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. There's no doubt about it, but it's a shame, just like Lester Hayes, that those guys are not in just yet. But I wanted you to hear from Mark McMillan, a guy who played alongside EA and could tell you, and you heard the disgust in his voice when he was talking about that situation. Coming up in segment number 2, Captain Kirk. That's what I like to call him. Kirk Morrison, good friend of mine as well, former linebacker for the Silver and Black, an Oakland guy. Joined my radio show on Monday to talk about the Super Bowl, talk about the Raiders, talk about Coach Antonio Pierce, and more. You'll hear that conversation coming up next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about DoorDash. And with the Super Bowl being played on Sunday, a lot of folks did not want to leave the house during the breaks because, well, they wanted to check out the commercials. The commercials during Super Bowl are always great. Now, I thought that they were so-so. I didn't think that they were anything special, but you never know until you watch them. So you won't be able to watch them if you're out and about trying to go get some food. Matter of fact, my guy Emmett Golden, who's part of my ESPN national show that I do on the nightly game night, he let me know that, I use DoorDash during the game, and it wasn't even for a restaurant. It wasn't even for fast food. I actually had groceries delivered in. You can do that as well. If you don't want to leave the house, you want to watch the commercials during the Super Bowl, or maybe you just don't want to leave the house, period. Maybe it's too cold out there, and it does get cold out there. You let DoorDash do all the work for you. Next time you're running low on dinner ideas, pet supplies, or just time, you can get so much more than you realize delivered right to your door. Whatever watch party or any party you got coming up, get it delivered with DoorDash. Football season may be over, but we're in the thick of basketball games, the school year, and let's face it, winter. I can think of a million reasons daily to use DoorDash. Hop on the app and make your day a little bit easier. Get dinner for tonight, groceries for the week, or a consolation prize for your sad friends in, San Francisco who lost Super Bowl 58, all on DoorDash. DoorDash, your door to more. Head to the DoorDash app to get everything you need delivered. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Want to get into the conversation I had with Kirk Morrison, good friend of mine. Joined my radio show on Monday, Unnecessary Roughness, on Raider Nation Radio 920, and we talked about all things from Super Bowl 58, Patrick Mahomes, what the Raiders need to do in the offseason, and including talking about Coach Antonio Pierce going from being an interim to the full-time head coach. Here's that conversation with Captain Kirk Morrison, from my radio show on Monday. What do you think about what AP's been able to do with the Silver and Black so far?
I mean, so far he's just continuing what he was able to do, taking over as the interim head coach. He's continued to have that momentum. He's continued to create a mindset, continue to make sure guys have the same confidence and swagger moving forward. That the journey is really just starting. Last year was honestly just the beginning. There's much more work and there's much more pressure now moving forward. I think last year was great. It was fun. It was new. It was exciting. It was a different contrast from how the season started. But this year, it's starting like that's from the beginning. So what kind of team will we see now without the interim tag from Antonio Pierce? What kind of team will we see from the Raiders? Will they have that same, fight, aggressiveness, desire that we saw in the final half of the season from week 1? I think that's what I want to see. I think that's what Antonio Pierce is preaching to his guys.
Kirk Morrison is with us here on Raider Nation Radio 920. Last week before the awards ceremony, the honors ceremony, you guys were on with AP, and he had this to say, and it really stood out to me. Check it out.
I mean, the challenges in that division alone, even Sean Payton over in Denver now, I mean, you got your work cut out for you.
No, I think it's the other way around. And they got their work cut out for me.
Really?
And the Raiders. I mean, I can only go off my 9 games, right? It was 3-1 in the division.
Yeah.
The way we played, I think, was very convincing in those games. We're going to be a problem.
Yeah.
I'm not looking at everybody else. They're going to have to start looking at us and the Raiders. That's the approach we're taking. I get it. We got to earn it. AP's just talking smack. No, we're not. We're going to work. We're going to work this whole offseason, get the best staff we can to put together. We're going to believe. We got one goal, and that's to win the division. We know what it goes through, but it doesn't have to go through the team in red. We can make it where it goes through Silver and Black, and that's going to be our goal.
I mean, he's 100% correct. I think that's the mentality of media and expectations around the league that are put upon teams, but that's not the expectation inside of a building, right? Inside of a building, inside of that facility, that Raiders facility, the expectation is that we are the baddest dudes in the league. and that it's not that we have to go through theirs, that they have to go through here. They got to come through us. And he mentioned that record that he had against the division, 3-1 down the stretch, that just shows you how important these division games are. And that's why it's like, hey, fellas, don't let people tell you what you have to do. Let us go out and dictate who we are. And I think that's what the point is, what he's trying to say, is that we dictate who we are. We go out and if we play our game, we know the style of brand of football that we know we can play, that people need to be worried about us, not us worried about them.
Kirk Morrison is with us here on Unnecessary Roughness, Raider Nation Radio 920. You saw the Super Bowl. You saw the Chiefs get another Lombardi that's back-to-back. What do the Raiders have to do to be able to consistently compete with those guys?
Honestly, they have to continue to keep progressing as an organization and preaching consistency, okay? Because the one thing that I can say is that Andy Reid has been in Kansas City for 11 seasons. They haven't changed who they've been. They've switched out a general manager. They go from John Dorsey to Brett Veach, but they pretty much have kept that staff together as much as possible. Nagy was there for a while. He leaves. He comes back. Eric Bieniemy was there a long time. He left. Now it seems that he's going to come back. To me, that's the consistency that you need in this league. And so if the Raiders want to compete and be at that, Antonio Pierce just said it right there in that interview clip. It's the coaches that he's going to bring on and how you can keep that coaching staff, continue to keep the message that everyone knows. That's how you build culture. When guys come into Kansas City, the culture's already been set. They know what the expectations are. They know the plays. They know, how practice is going to be. They know the schedule. The Raiders have to get to that point. Because if you think about just the last 5 years, 6 years, there's been how many different coaches? 4 different coaches if you count interims,
right?
General managers. So it's not a knock on the Raiders, but it definitely can show you, why are we so much different than Kansas City? Well, they haven't changed. They've been the same every single year. And when you have it that way, it makes it easier to come to work because you know what to do, you know the expectations. And I think that's why having Antonio Pierce coming back as the full-time head coach, it gets you on that path to competing for a division title because the message will be the same. The mentality will be the same. The schedule will be the same. There is nothing that's going to throw the guys off.
What would you guys do? I always talk about the law firm of Morrison and Howard, and rest in peace to Thomas Howard, of course. But what would you guys do if you had to go up against Patrick Mahomes and try to defend him a couple times a year like the Raiders do?
Well, I think that you can't fool him. He knows that yesterday you saw it in the Super Bowl. He knows where he wants to go with the football. It's just team defense is what you got to play. I thought the 49ers did a good job of that early in the football game, and then Patrick Mahomes became Patrick Mahomes, and Travis Kelce started to make some big, huge plays. But you got to be able to frustrate through him. So that means get him off his first read, make him try to scramble and do some things. And you saw him do some uncharacteristic things in the first half, threw an interception, hadn't thrown one in the last 2 postseasons. So, yeah, there are some things that I would think as myself, if I was playing against him, definitely try to keep some of the stickiest coverage and just get him off the initial read. And then after that, if he wants to turn into backyard football, go right ahead. But keep a spy on him and find ways to make sure he gets the ball out of his hands as quickly as possible. I think the Raiders have done a good job. Like I said, the last team to beat the Kansas City Chiefs are these Raiders. And so I would look at that game plan from Christmas Day and just keep going over and over because I thought a lot of people thought the Raiders had the blueprint to beating the Kansas City Chiefs, and yet no one can duplicate what the Raiders were able to do on Christmas Day in Kansas City.
It's funny. I actually did a couple radio interviews for that exact reason. They're like, Hugh, we got to have you on to tell us what the blueprint is that the Raiders had to beat Kansas City. And I was like, defense, a couple defensive touchdowns, the run game. Really, The quarterback play wasn't great. And this leads me to my next question. I've been saying that I feel like you need a special quarterback to compete with Mahomes. What do you need at that quarterback position to be able to consistently give your team a chance?
I think you have to have luck, to be honest. You just need consistency, like that I talked about earlier, between or synergy between the coach offensive play caller, and your quarterback. If you have that kind of synergy, you're going to be able to say, well, you know what? The reason why the 49ers were successful in the first half is because they kept the Kansas City Chiefs on the sideline. They had some long drives and sustained drives. They kept that Chiefs offense on the sideline. I thought the Raiders did the same thing, right? What did they do? They ran the ball effectively, and they kept Mahomes on the sideline. And then because he was a little restless, he comes in the game and feels like he's got to play catch-up. He's got to score 14 points on one drive, and that's where you start to see turnovers come, interceptions come, because you make them take more chances. So I think that is something that you can see moving forward. You would hope that that would be sort of a blueprint to try to slow Mahomes down. But, I mean, he's one of the best in the business for a reason.
Kirk Morrison is our guest here on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness. Now, as a young man from Oakland, California, when you're watching that Super Bowl, the Chiefs, you know obviously the history of the Raiders and the Chiefs, division rival. You're from the town. You know what it is between the Niners and the Raiders. What are your thoughts when you're watching that Super Bowl in Allegiant Stadium?
I think for me, I was trying to stay as neutral as possible. I'm watching two teams that, like I said, I grew up despising. And now, as I've gotten into my older age and been retired from the league, it was more me hating because I didn't like them while I was a player, but you respect them now as an analyst because of how they've been able to create their ball clubs, create their rosters, and have the sustained longevity of success on both sides. So I'm watching the game, and I'm respecting both teams, and I just felt that the Kansas City Chiefs didn't have enough for the 49ers. I just thought the 49ers were a better team on paper, and it just turns out you can't give Patrick Mahomes the ball last.
Right.
The 49ers allow Patrick Mahomes to have the ball in his hands on a last possession, sudden death type of scenario, and Patrick Mahomes delivered. That was the hard part. So it's going to be fun to see now when you think about Kansas City and what they've been able to do. Patrick Mahomes is undefeated in Allegiant Stadium. I don't know how we got to make that change. We got to take one away from him, but he's had a ton of success in Allegiant Stadium. We can't allow that to happen much further.
No, not at all. You're right about that, and we'll close out with this. Tom Telesco is now the GM. AP is the full-time head coach. Obviously, the staff is being put together, continuing as we speak. How do you think those two really attack this offseason now that it's officially the offseason for all 32 teams?
Well, Tom Telesco has done a terrific job in drafting players, especially at the top of rounds. You know, when you think about Asante Samuel, Rashawn Slater, Tuli Pelotu as well, Derwin James, just to name a few. He's drafted a lot of high-end talent, and the Raiders got a first-round pick right now. So picking 13, I think that he's got an eye, where there was also two. Remember, he waited, didn't trade up. He went and got Justin Herbert. Remember when the Miami Dolphins went and got Tua? If he really wanted to, he would have jumped up and got Tua. He says, no, let's stand pat. We take Justin Herbert. And so, you know, for the most part, we would think that seems to be the correct move. Big year for Justin Herbert. But I always like Tom Telesco's eye for talent. He's been able to bring the guys in. Now it's all about doing what? Getting it right on the field. But bringing in talent, he has done a terrific job in doing that. And now it's AP's job that once Tom gets the players in, AP's got to coach him and mold him into the Raider lifestyle, right? The Raider aura and how to be a Raider. So the culture is already set, and now you got a general manager in Tom Telesco, who can acquire, I think, some of the better players around football.
Think there's any chance that the Raiders try to trade up and maybe get one of these top signal callers that's coming out?
There's always a chance. And we've got plenty of time to think about it, brother. We got the combine starts in 2 weeks, man.
I know.
So I can't. It's 2 weeks away. We still digesting the Super Bowl, and in 2 weeks, you know, a lot's going to happen. You got franchise tags that are going to be coming out. We're going to look at this draft class of quarterbacks. We got a long time into the draft. We're going to be talking for a long time. Chicago still has to figure out what they want to do.
Right.
So a lot is predicated on what the Bears do.
Yeah.
So I don't know what the Raiders are going to do because we got to figure out what the Bears do first. So there'll be contingency plans, I think, going around, because if the Bears decide to keep Justin Fields, then that now leaves a quarterback, I think, at the top of the draft for the Raiders to maybe move up a little bit. right? Or with Chicago at 9, do the Raiders move up to go use that pick and switch around? So there is so much to think about in the next, 2-3 months.
Right.
I definitely feel like the Raiders are in a good position. Got some cap space as well to make some moves.
So there you go. It's always great to catch up with Kirk Morrison. He's got a very sharp football mind. He's a guy that does a lot of college football for ESPN. He's a guy that is on the Rams broadcast. He just does a lot of fantastic work. He really does. I'm so proud of what he is able to do and able to accomplish, and also proud to just call him my friend. And so when I need him on the show, he's always making time available for me, and he did that on Monday. So I definitely appreciate that. Hopefully you appreciated that conversation as well. What's on your mind? 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line. We'll get to your calls and texts. We'll do it next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we do that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is FanDuel. Right now, you need to get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook. Football season may be over, but basketball, full steam ahead. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Just like that. You can bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and a whole lot more. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. It makes every game that much more exciting when you got a little skin in the game, and you can do that with FanDuel. FanDuel is the official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Jordan in Oregon. He's calling to talk about the quarterback position and what he feels like the Raiders need to do in order to get their franchise guy. Here he is, Jordan in Oregon.
Hey, what's going on, Q? Jordan in Oregon. Hey, I wanted to call in here after the Super Bowl and just say I'm thrilled it's over. Pretty fired up that we can now kind of look into next season and start turning the page, as you would say. And, hey, the first thing I wanted to bring up and just kind of make a point about is our quarterback situation. And I'm, obviously excited for free agency, but more than ever, I agree with a lot of what the majority of Raider Nation and I guess a lot of the insiders and stuff right now, and even some reports that came out over Super Bowl weekend, I agree with the idea that we have to move up to get our franchise quarterback. And, I've always been reluctant to want to trade picks and draft capital, especially with what we've seen happen in the past to teams with it not work out, like even the 49ers with Trey Lance. But I also think you have to look at your odds of hitting on a player, too. And for the Raiders, first-round picks, as it's a very obvious fact, we haven't really done well on hitting on those first-rounders. And so I'd already say, 50% of first-rounders at best don't live up to the hype. And so, I'm looking at this. If the Raiders have to trade 3 first-round picks to move up to, let's say, where the Patriots are at, there's some reports that maybe the Patriots would be willing to trade that pick because they feel that they're further away. And so than just a quarterback. And so that's my point, Q, is I think we are just right there. The defense, we're going to be able to put some more money into that defense. We're, for the most part, fairly young defense, and we don't have a lot of capital dumped into our defense. And so I see that only picking up, and I just think we're at a spot where if there's ever a time, as far as the stars all aligning to where, you have to have a quarterback you want in order to move up, and I think the Raiders do. And so that's a box right there you check. But then you also have to look at your overall team and say, are we a quarterback away from contending? And I think the Raiders can realistically check that box too. We don't have a bunch of turnover as far as we're bringing back AP, defensive coordinator the same. We should be expecting to have a pretty decent defense again next year. And then what I wanted to also say is that after the Super Bowl, I love your pod on Monday. Definitely hit home. I just think as Raider fans, we have to look at the big picture. We know how to play the Chiefs better than anybody in football right now for the most part. We played them great both games last year, obviously beat them on Christmas. But the only way we're going to be able to really knock them out is if we get like a franchise guy and have a kick-ass defense just like that. Peace out, man.
Thank you for the call, my man. I appreciate you. It's been a minute. I do feel like the Raiders have a pretty solid roster. Right? I'm not one of those guys that always pounds the table to do whatever it takes to go get your quarterback. But looking at what they have offensively and defensively, I think now would be the time, especially with the talent that's coming into the league in this upcoming draft. Now the key is getting it right. You've got to identify them, like you mentioned. You got to feel comfortable with your decision. And if you do, you'll get it. If you have any hesitation, you know what they say, you study long, you study wrong. If you have any doubt in your mind, don't pull the trigger, right? Be like me. I'm scared money. Like, I don't like to pull the trigger on moves like that. But if you have conviction, if you feel like that's your guy, similar to what the Chiefs thought when they looked at Patrick Mahomes, they said, you know what, we got Alex Smith. He's getting us to the playoffs. That guy right there, that dude can put us over the top. If you feel confident in that, pull the trigger. If you don't, then don't, right? And you just have to live with it. You just have to continue to move and hope that you get your right guy to fall to you. And I know Tom Telesco is a fan of kind of letting the board fall to him. That was actually something that I had wrong on my initial scouting report when it came to Tom Telesco, that, you know, he was a fan of trading up. He's actually only done it one time. He doesn't trade back either, really just lets the board fall to him. So maybe it'll be different this year. Who knows? I know that Mark Davis was very adamant when he was talking about the quarterback position with the GMs. What are they going to do with that position? So maybe with a little bit of pressure from the owner, with a little bit of pressure from AP, maybe he decides to change how he rolls and goes and gets that guy. But he might just let the board fall to him. You heard Kirk Morrison say that in segment number 2 when I had that interview with him from my radio show on Monday. But thanks so much for that call. I appreciate you. Up next, got a text from Raider Ed. He says, hey, Q, Raider Ed here, was watching your last show about the Raiders doing what they have to do to get a quarterback in the draft. I totally agree they need a difference maker at quarterback. I hope they do that, but also go after Chris Jones and a beast offensive lineman or two. The defense from last year is not guaranteed to be as good as next season. So, yes, push all the chips in and go for that quarterback. I like Daniels, but how about staying at 13 and going after Nix, Penix, or McCarthy? We won't beat KC many times with a quarterback who can't make plays consistently. I also think we need another quick, sure-handed receiver. That'll give them the best opportunity to take over the AFC West. That's from Raider Ed. And, yeah, that's the thing. And as I mentioned with Telesco letting the board fall to him, it might be a better option to wait for a Michael Penix, a Bo Nix, or a J.J. McCarthy. That's what Mel Kiper Jr., and I'm trying to get that audio so I can actually play it on the show here. That's what he suggested. He suggested J.J. McCarthy. He said that the Raiders need to do something at their quarterback position. He thinks it's going to be too rich to try to move up to the top 3, not to mention the top 3 teams all need quarterbacks, even though there's reports that the Patriots are looking to move off. I think the Bears are going to move off as well because they're going to get a king's ransom for that number 1 pick. But, again, it's going to be a king's ransom. So, yeah, there's a lot of questions there. You definitely need some playmakers. The Raiders do have the actual cash in hand, so they can go after a guy like Chris Jones. I think he'd be a difference maker. Obviously, he's going to want to get paid, but I think they're in better position this year to make at least one big splash in free agency. Chris Jones could very easily be that guy. Raider Ed, thanks for that text. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a call from Heavy D in Western New York. He's calling to talk about the quarterback position and what he thinks about it. Then he has a straight-up question for me and for Raider Nation. Here he is, Heavy D in Western New York.
Q, Heavy D hollering at you from Western New York. Hey, I have a statement, and then I'm going to follow it with a point-blank question for you. You, our host, our spokesman, our charismatic leader. I'm just going to, no more hypotheticals. I want to ask you a question. I'm hearing a lot of Raider chat that we need to just do whatever it takes to get up to the top 3, and I'm not in disagreement, but I think Raider Nation is in denial about the massive compensation it's going to take to get into the top 3. I think the top pick is just off limits. They're asking for historic compensation. We're too far back. Caleb Williams was as highly regarded as anyone since Andrew Luck. From what I've read, I don't see a way to get him to get up to the top 2 or 3. Both teams are in desperate need, Washington and the Patriots, of a franchise quarterback. They would be crazy to trade back. They would have to be overwhelmed to trade back. Washington already did this once. They took Chase Young at number 2 instead of taking somebody like Justin Herbert. So getting up to the top 2, 3 is going to be really, really difficult. We've got Atlanta ahead of us, the Vikings, the Broncos. So any trade package up into those top 3, and more realistically probably top 2, is going to require Mad Max Crosby. So my question to you is, do you include him in a package? For a franchise quarterback, I would. We had Khalil Mack. He wrecked the league, but he didn't make us much better. There's only so much a defensive end can do. It's a quarterback-driven league. I would absolutely part with Mad Max. So it would be Mad Max and who else? Because you said yesterday on your program that you trade 3 number 1s. to get up into the top 3. I would do that in a heartbeat, but it's going to cost more than that. There's too many teams in front of us that need QBs. I don't think 3-1s are going to do it this year. If we can, sign on the dotted line right now. But my question is to you is, would you part with Mad Max Crosby as part of a package to get up into the top 3? I'm dying to hear what you have to say, and love the show. Going to be a lot of speculation this whole off season. Appreciate everything that you do. Thanks. Have a great day.
Heavy D. It's the D. I can't do it like that. It's money earning Mount Vernon. Heavy D, right? Big time fan of Heavy D. Rest in peace. But no, thanks for the call. I do appreciate you, my man. And no, I wouldn't part ways with Max Crosby. Max Crosby is untouchable, in my opinion. Devontae Adams, I would part ways with them reluctantly. Right? I mean, because you can go get your quarterback, but you want to have your difference maker wide receiver. But the only thing about Devontae, and the only reason I would agree to move on from him is only because he's older, right? And feel like, all right, maybe you can go get a wide receiver in the later rounds that is a dominant young dude, right? And you got Jacoby Myers, who you saw what he was able to do his first year with the silver and black, and he's used to being the number 1 wide receiver. But again, selfishly, I want to keep Devontae Adams. But in fact, if you do have to move off a player and they're demanding a big-time player, I'd move Devontae before I move Max. Max, in my opinion, is untouchable. Raider Nation could chime in, but again, in my opinion, Max Crosby is the only untouchable on the Raiders roster for sure. Thanks so much for that call. I do appreciate you. Up next, got a pretty lengthy text from John C. in Denver. He says, hey, Q, love your show. I always start my day with your podcast. I just want to say I don't know why everyone's saying we need a quarterback to compete, which I do agree. We probably do need someone, but I don't think that's the key. I think our defense showed how to beat Mahomes by making him run for his life. The last couple coaches kept adding offensive pieces while they left the scraps to the defensive side. Now that we have a defensive coach who was part of the team that beat one of the best offenses ever in the undefeated Patriots, we can add a couple pieces on our defense and push it to the next level. We have the cap space to add an interior defensive tackle, starting corner to pair alongside Jack Jones. We can address the offensive line in the draft and maybe a veteran guard. Get our defense to an elite level and make life hell for Mahomes and Herbert, then run the ball on the offensive side to eat clock and keep them off the field. Just curious on your thoughts. That's John C. in Denver. And John, I agree. I think the defense is definitely the key, and that's what the Raiders used on Christmas when they beat the Chiefs was the defense. They also scored 2 defensive touchdowns. There's not going to be too many times when the quarterback can go from the first quarter to the end of the game without completing the pass and you win the game, right? You have to have a quarterback, in my opinion, that is a difference maker, that when the defense isn't on their A game, they can put the ball on their shoulders or use their legs or both to win the game. Just like you saw Pat Mahomes on Sunday, Super Bowl 58, use his legs, especially in the second half, get it done. You saw Brock Purdy against the Lions use his legs in the second half to get it done, to help push them to the Super Bowl, right? I mean, you've got to be able to have a guy that can do it. I just think that the Raiders need to want more. It's okay to like what they have, but they also need somebody, they need a Josh Allen. They need a Lamar Jackson. They need a Justin Herbert. They need a Joe Burrow. They need their version of that guy. And look, Mahomes has beat all those guys. But at least you feel like that there's a chance. At least those teams feel like that they have a chance to compete. But yes, you're right. The defense has to continue to grow, continue to get better, and just continue to be what they are. And I don't think, without a shadow of a doubt, that they're going to stop. They're going to start ignoring the defense. Antonio Pierce, as you mentioned, is a defensive-minded head coach, but he also knows you've got to have a dude that could throw that rock, right? Remember, in New York, even though they beat the Patriots, they still had a guy named Eli Manning. No, Eli Manning's not the fanciest quarterback, but Eli's going into the Hall of Fame. All right, he's going to be a Hall of Famer, right? He beat the Patriots twice. Yeah, they had the strength of their defense, but he also was able to make all the plays, right? The Raiders need their Eli Manning. They don't have their Eli Manning. Aiden O'Connell's a good quarterback, but I think that the Raiders should expect more. And should expect, and it's okay to want more. I think that that's fine. But thanks so much for the text. I do appreciate you. Finally, we close out with a call from the 916. Didn't have a name, but it's a quick call. He's calling in as a first-time caller. Wants to talk about Super Bowl 58, wanted to point something out about the game and the end in particular that kind of rubbed him the wrong way. It's a call from the 916. Here it is.
What up, Q? First-time caller. Man, I've been listening to you since right before Josh McDaniels got fired, and it's been great information. I want to chime in on the Super Bowl in our stadium. Man, it was like one of them ones. Win, who could win? Who cares, right? But I would have preferred the Niners to win just on some Bay Area type thing. What really rubbed me the wrong way was at the end when, I don't know, I was calling to see. I haven't seen it, but I've seen it after the Super Bowl, the Kansas City player planting his flag in our field. Not feeling that, man. Looking forward to the off season, man.
Thank you for the call. Yeah, and I appreciate you. And next time you call in, man, you got to leave your name so I don't have to refer to you as the guy from the 916. But, yeah, I saw them plant the flag in the middle of the field. You know, the good thing about that whole everything at Super Bowl 58, you know, Allegiant Stadium, 49ers and Chiefs, is that it's over. That's the best part, right? The Chiefs are out of the stadium. Chiefs are out of the locker rooms. The 49ers are out of the stadium. They're out of the locker rooms. They're about their way. Right, the Raiders can get back to normalcy, right? They let them borrow their stadium. They put it on display for the whole league to see. A lot of the stars were in town. That's really great for recruiting as far as, you know, hey, free agency is coming up. Don't you want to play in this building? Even a guy like Chris Jones. But, yeah, that nightmare that Raider Nation suffered is over. And just have to move on. Don't have to worry about it. Everything will be back to normal. The locker rooms will be fine. Them planting the flag is whatever. Look, the bottom line, the Raiders need to start consistently beating the Chiefs at Allegiant Stadium so they don't feel comfortable with planting the flag, right? Mahomes has never lost at Allegiant Stadium. Like, think about that. He is too comfortable with going into Allegiant and winning. So the Raiders need to start beating him not only on the road like they did on Christmas morning, but they need to beat him at Allegiant. So that's something that's their next task. And Antonio Pierce knows that. The Raiders know that. Mark Davis knows that. Hell, the league knows that. They've got to be able to find a way to consistently beat Patrick Mahomes. But thanks so much for that call. Definitely appreciate you. Got a text out of San Antonio, a call from Raider X, a text from the 213. We'll get those coming up on tomorrow's show. We'll have more news and notes. We'll have plenty of more conversation as well, like we do each and every day here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until then, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.